Simon, welcome to the show. Thank you very much for joining me.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
And some of my guests that have joined the military, they tended to join immediately after school. It was something that they always wanted to do immediately. But I know from your story that you decided to go into further education and then join the military at 24. Was the military always on the cards, or was there a reason that you perhaps delayed it for a little bit longer than some of the others?
Yeah, military was always on the cards. It's all I ever wanted to do. But I think because I had that set in my mind, I almost didn't feel a rush to do it. I wanted to do some other things first. So traveled, went to uni, and then decided to join. And personally, I think going in slightly older is definitely beneficial just because you have some life experience. Like I really take my hat off to anyone that does join straight out, particularly 16, 17, going straight from essentially school into the military. That is a big jump. Whereas being 24, having that bit of life experience, for me personally, it worked well.
What were those boxes that you needed to tick beforehand? Then you went to university, you went traveling. What were the things that were maybe on the Simon Jeffries bucket list that needed to happen before you said, right, I'm going to go after this other purpose of mine?
I think it was just enjoying life, honestly. Just traveling. Went and lived in Canada, did a snowboard season there. Was working in a hotel, cleaning hotel rooms, earning no money, but just living the abroad, enjoying the season. I guess the season air lifestyle. And then same with uni. Did history, which I really enjoyed. And then after that, went to New Zealand and did a load of outdoor sort of training / teaching, and traveled around the North and South Islands. And then it was after that I was kind of like, yeah, okay, ready to now go and get started.
And was it the Royal Marines that you looked at initially? And I understand you initially applied to be an officer but didn't quite go to plan. What happened there?
Yeah, so originally, it was the Royal Marines, joined the Royal Marines, and originally I was going to join as an officer. And the very first thing you have to do is a psychometric test. It's pretty basic. It's at the careers office. This is before you even get close to even walking through the gates of the Royal Marines. And I failed the maths portion of it. Maths has never been my strongest suit. And the choice was, okay, you can either wait 6 months and try it again for the next batch, or you can just join as a recruit, as a soldier. And for me, it wasn't even, I didn't even debate it for more than probably 5 minutes. I was like, no, I'll just join. Just because I wanted to get started. And retrospectively, having been in and the experience that I had, and obviously you'll never know the other experience if you've taken that other path, but for me was great. And it opened up more opportunities. There's the one thing I will say about the sort of non-commissioned route is there's a lot more opportunities just because of the amount of jobs that are open to you that aren't necessarily open as an officer. The career path is slightly narrower, so it worked in my favor in the end.
It's funny how sometimes things don't go to plan, and then you maybe take, I wouldn't say knee jerk, but you take the less favored path, and it actually opens you up to more of the things that you're actually grateful for further down the line.
Yeah, it's very, none of us have got a crystal ball, so we don't know what the other path would have looked like. I think I wrote about this the other day. All you can do is make decisions as much as possible based on your values and the direction that you wish to go in life, and then make the best of whatever opportunities present themselves. And if you always do that, it's far more likely that you're going to have a good journey along that path that you've chosen, as opposed to not.
You said you made that decision very quickly, but I wonder, is it easy to do that when you've maybe got friends, family around you who have maybe seen you get this university degree, go traveling, and almost there's an expectation that you would go into the forces as an officer because of that pre-work that you've done? I guess you said that you made that decision very quickly, but I know that a lot of us have external influences that we need to satisfy, listen to before we move forward with the decision.
I have always been probably very independent from, not I've got a great family and supportive, but I don't think I even bounced it off anyone. I just made the decision. I was like, is this in line with me? Yeah, it feels right. Yeah, go for it. So I've kind of, I guess, lucky in that sense that I'm not sure exactly where that's come from. I think, I don't know, maybe it is the values and ethics. Obviously, we absorb a lot from our environment and growing up. And my parents, so I grew up on a small farm, parents were farmers, had a very, that's what they loved. It's very hard work, and there definitely was not very much money in it. But perhaps absorbing that clear purpose matched with hard work and doing something that you're passionate about, to me, because the military was that path. I think it was less about the status of being an officer versus it was just to be a Royal Marine. In my head, the original path was, okay, I'm going to go to college, I'm going to go to university. It makes sense to apply as an officer. Right, that path's closed. Do I want to wait 6 months? No, I want to join now. Okay, take that decision. So it was kind of a simple decision chain in line with my values to get to that answer quite quickly.
That level of clarity is so important. I think anyone listening to this can start to look at choices that they've made and maybe understand the ones that they can make quicker, as you did. They're probably the ones that are the most in line with their value set, as you said, rather than maybe the ones that they hum and haw on or have to spend a lot of time deliberating. It's because there's not such a clear understanding of this is where I'm going to go and this is what I'm going to take action on, because maybe they haven't done that self-work that it seems that at quite a young age you were very set on what the why was.
Yeah, it's obviously, it does, as we get older and the more complicated life becomes and we have people dependent on us, etc., and the relationships around it, it makes those decisions, it can make them more complicated. But the very start point, and what most people don't take the time to do, and what we work on a lot with people through the coaching, is very few people stop and actually look at how they want their life to be and are more proactive with driving it forwards, as opposed to, it's very easy to slip into, finish school, get a job, fast pace of life, you're on the treadmill, and then you just sort of retrospectively assign who you are based on what's happened to you, as opposed to, no, this is who I want to be, and therefore I'm going to drive that forward by making conscious choices. And that's everything from very small choices that we make day to day, the food we eat, the people we interact with, the exercise that we do, all the way through to the bigger ones of, this is the career I want to do, this is the job I want to have, this is where I want to live, this is how I want my life to look in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is. So it's a scale. It doesn't have to be in, again, that's something people slip into. They maybe avoid doing this work, well, for two reasons. One, because they feel like they're going to have to make massive changes when they do it. But perhaps also, being honest with yourself, and perhaps the answers that come up mean that you are going to have to make hard choices around perhaps a relationship that you're in or a job that you're in. And often it can be hard to confront that. However, the alternative is you carry on living a life that actually you're not completely content with, and you're going to see the repercussions of that across all of your life. And you're going to wake up one day and go, why didn't I change this 20 years ago? It's very easy to say. It can be hard to put into practice. And again, it's a process a lot that we work with people to sort of help navigate through that.
Absolutely. I hosted a gentleman called Elliot Wise, who's like a serial entrepreneur. I think he owns like 11 different businesses. And he was speaking about how many people will kind of willingly experience like micro pain every single day in the things that they don't enjoy, rather than, and the analogy that we ended up kind of finishing on in the podcast was like ripping the plaster off, in the way that you're talking there, like that really hard conversation to maybe remove yourself from a job or a relationship is going to hurt a lot. It's going to sting like a bitch, whatever phrase you want to use, it's going to sting. But if you stay in it, it's just going to be constant pain for such a long period of time that will probably compound to be greater than the kind of everyday annoyance or that one removal that would do for you. And like you say, that self-work will probably have an element of pain and discomfort. But if we lean into that, then we actually enable ourselves to have much more deep pleasure further down the line. And I want to understand a little bit more around your progress during the Royal Marines and then your progress up towards the Special Forces. How long were you, quote unquote, what I would call a normal Royal Marine before you moved towards the Special Forces?
Yeah, just one point of what you said there. The best summary that I've heard from it before that is easy choices, hard life, hard choices, easy life. And that is, if we avoid the bigger or the harder decisions, the ones that are uncomfortable for us, and we shy away from those, we're going to pay a price for it. Whereas if you are willing to pay that price up front and make those hard and comfortable choices, you will reap a reward for that in how your life looks long term.
Well
And
said.
again, can be easy to say, but the more we practice it, and we'll probably get onto this, but all of these things are just skills. Mindset is a skill set. And the more that we practice them, the easier it becomes to do these things. So the Royal Marines. So I only really did a year as a kind of general duties Marine. And then I always had the goal of going for selection, but I didn't feel like I had enough experience at that point to go for it. So I first of all applied to be an SFC, so Special Forces Communicator, which is essentially you're still a Royal Marine, but you're attached to the SBS doing tactical signals for them. So I did that, and then I was in that role for a couple of years, and then I applied for selection.
And when you apply for selection, I've spoken to Lindsay Bruce in the podcast, who, albeit was in the SAS rather than the SBS, he described what that journey was like. And I wonder, from your perspective, like how was that for you? Because I know everyone has different challenges. Some people get through in the second time. Some people, they don't breeze it, but they almost feel like they were born to make their way through something as challenging as that. What was your own experience, Simon?
My biggest takeaway from it is it comes back to that purpose piece. It's such a testing 6 months that the only way you get through it is by having a very strong internal driver, i.e. nothing else can matter. Like nothing else in life can be as important as that. And you see it similar, you see it mirrored across elite athletes, musicians, whatever, any kind of high level of success requires a high degree of selfishness and sacrifice. But the key thing that I take away from it, it's not, I don't term it as sacrifice, because when you're on the right path, you're not sacrificing anything. Like I would say I got as much enjoyment and satisfaction out of the journey and training towards selection as I did passing it, because I was driving towards something that meant a huge amount to me. And it's a really important takeaway, because with goals, if you're always offsetting your satisfaction and happiness to the end point, and you think that when you get there, that is when you're going to have made it, that's when you're going to feel happy or content, you're not. You're going to get there and move the goalposts. If you're not happy in the process, if you're not finding that happiness and satisfaction already, it's very unlikely you're going to find it at the end as well. So to me, that journey, it was very hard, but it was very satisfying. And I went into it with the mantra or ethos that there was just no way I was coming off it unless I got a fail. So I failed, I didn't meet the standards, or there was a medical reason, injured myself or whatever, then I wasn't going to come off that course no matter what happened. And that's the way that I approached it.
It's a deal that you'd made with yourself in advance, and like you say, that was your why to go through the hardest parts, so the hills, the jungle, and all the psychological and physical challenges that come with that. But even, I suppose, in those moments where you've got your why there, what were the times where you were probably the most challenged during the process?
The jungle is definitely the most challenging part of it. The hills phase of it it's just to get your plane ticket to the jungle. It is hard. When I say it's not hard, it is hard. There's obviously a physical. It's physically taxing. More than anything, it's boring. Like the same thing day in, day out, and it's just monotonous in your own head, on the hills, in shit terrain and adverse weather. But it's compared to the jungle, it's not. They don't even care who you are at that point. You're just a number. The hills is just there to trim the numbers down to a sustainable point to take to the jungle, and the jungle is selection. Like once you don't really lose anyone who passes the jungle, you don't really lose people past that point. People talk about the escape and evasion. It's like it's not. Again, it's not hard really. It's just part of the process, and then the continuation training. So the jungle really is the test, and it's very hard to describe to anyone what it's like, because it's such a harsh, taxing environment anyway, just to live and operate there. When you throw in the pressure of selection on top of that, it's like you're on your limit every day for the entire time. And so it just tests every, I guess, part of you as a person. Physically, it's very, very demanding. In that heat, the humidity, carrying loads up to 140 pounds, sometimes while doing tactical work. The mental side of it's your internal self-talk. And a huge part that gets a lot of people is you don't get very much feedback through that process. And if you think about it, for most of our lives, we're always getting feedback on what we're doing. And so when that's taken away, and because you're operating in a harsh environment where you can't help but make mistakes, everyone messes up and makes mistakes. For some people, they really get in their head about that and they fail themselves because they come to the conclusion, well, I'm going to fail anyway because I've messed up on this occasion doing whatever it was. And so what's the point in suffering for another few weeks? And so they pull themselves off. And then inevitably, when they go for the interview, their kind of exit interview, and asked how they thought they were doing, they're then told, actually, no, you were on for a pass. You were doing pretty well. But
Lindsay spoke to me about like a DS, like scribbling in their notebook while looking at you.
Yeah.
And that almost being like an element of psychological warfare where you're thinking, is it a positive note he's writing? Is it a negative note? Is it even about me? It might be about the guy that's next to me or behind me or in front of me. Or it might just be that he's not writing anything and he's just doing this to see how I respond to this level of pressure, which if I'm thinking about the kind of people that I would want out in the front line for Britain in these exceptional circumstances, it's probably the people that can put up with that level of stress and strain. But I can completely understand that element of we are so used to feedback, particularly as a society nowadays, that when that's removed, your own internal dialogue just probably runs wild at times, and getting that under control is something that I think must be an incredibly valuable skill that you now have.
Yeah, and it's something we try and teach through our coaching, because in reality it doesn't matter. It does not matter. You can't control that. That's an external factor. How that DS is perceiving you, what he's writing down, is completely out of your control. You can influence it in the way that you act, but you can't control it. And so letting go of that and just accepting it and bringing the focus back to you and what you are doing, and making sure that in every action you take, you are doing your best. And yes, as part of that, you will make mistakes, because we all do. But putting that aside, having the feedback loop of learning, it's like, right, okay, I didn't do well on that. Reflect on it. How can I improve next time? And continually doing that and striving to do your best is going to give you the best chance of success. And it just all comes back to process. The more you apply that to anything, the better results you will get. It's completely pointless to worry about those things that are out of your control.
Yeah, I'm entirely on board. When I think of Simon Jeffries and the content you've been putting out there over the kind of 6 or 7 months that I've been following you very closely, you speak a lot about moving average. How did that come to be, and when did you create that concept?
Yeah, that is probably the single most powerful concept through all the coaching programs we've done over the years. That's been one constant. And that's the one thing we always get feedback from when people make the shift to a moving average ethos. Things really start to change. So moving average is basically, if you imagine a lot of people live in what we call boom bust cycles. So, a good example is, let's say you want to get fit and lose some weight. And so you decide, right, this is it. This is the time I'm going to make that massive change. And you find that what you perceive as the perfect program, and you start on it, and it's great for a week or so. But then, work gets busy. One of your kids gets sick. Something happens. You get ill. And so you miss one of the meals you're meant to eat. You miss a workout or something like that. And so you very quickly fall into the mindset of, well, I've already missed that one, so what's the point in this one? And before you know it, you've just thrown it all out the window. It's very much an all or nothing approach. Either you do everything perfectly or you don't do anything at all. And so you then just back to square zero, and you stay at that point until the pain gets acute enough and you're like, no, I've got to change something. And the cycle just repeats. And so it's up, down all the time. Whereas moving average is essentially that you do not need perfection to make progress. All you need is to consistently enough find the small wins that will keep your moving average positive rather than negative. And so, okay, you don't have 60 minutes to do that workout you planned, but you've got 20 minutes that you can do some components of it, or maybe it's just going for a walk. That's still adding to your moving average. If you always think about it in these small wins, and if that adds or takes away from your moving average, it makes it far easier to keep that consistency. And when you deconstruct anyone that is successful in what they're doing, all the way from elite level just down to, you know, you and I, normal people going through their day-to-day lives, you'll find that it's those small actions done consistently as opposed to these big massive shifts that make all the difference. And, you know, like take the 8-week diet plan or whatever. Maybe it takes you 16 weeks or 32 weeks. Well, who cares? Like, there's not like a finish line with any of this stuff anyway. It's not like you can do a diet plan or fitness plan and then that's it, you're there. It carries on for the rest of your life. So in reality, it doesn't matter. And that's the other part of it, is just getting rid of those arbitrary timeframes where you feel like you have to do things, and instead look at building a lifestyle of behaviors and habits as opposed to one-off events and milestones.
The all or nothing nature of how a lot of people approach it, and that boom and bust phrase that you used is very striking to me, because I do think you see people turn up the dial all the way on lots of different areas of their life, and it's not sustainable, as you said. It's an 8-week burst, it's a 6-week shred, whatever terms get thrown around from a marketing perspective. Whereas if you can, like you say, build in some lifestyle habits that are almost like, and one of the terms that I've liked over the years is non-negotiables. So like there are certain things that just always happen. So like you say, your work meeting overruns and it means that you're going to have to squeeze in the 60-minute session, but it's going to be 35 minutes. Well, guess what? I'm going to do a portion of it that I know is going to give me the most bang for my buck. And the accessory movements that ideally I would do, they've not happened today because unfortunately that's just not been possible. But I've not cancelled the gym entirely. And like you say, maybe like you go to work and you've forgotten the meal prep lunch that you had. Okay, you don't need to throw the baby out with the bathwater and just decide that you're going to go and buy a McDonald's or a KFC or whatever's there. You're going to buy something that's relatively equivalent to try and maintain the average above what you would have done in the worst case scenario.
Yeah, it's exactly that. It is the antithesis of that all or nothing mindset. And the other part that we add into it is a growth versus a fixed mindset. So that is basically just the understanding that you will make mistakes. There's going to be ups and downs and plateaus. It's not going to be a perfectly straight line upward trajectory, as opposed to a fixed mindset, which is really about that all or nothing. And again, perfection, that you have to have perfection to get the results that you're looking for. And it's just not the case.
From a growth and a fixed mindset perspective, do you think people can move more towards a growth mindset, or do you think we're very much, how would you describe it, nature versus nurture in that regard?
I think we've all got base personality traits. However, there's a huge part of it, massive part of it is that's changeable. Like we've all got, I haven't come across anyone that's, you know, reached their limit in any of these areas, because most of us don't spend enough time working on them. Usually, generally with fixed and growth mindsets, it's not that we're one or the other. It varies in different parts of our life, and it can evolve and change throughout our lives. I, for example, was very much, I had a great growth mindset when it came to work, career, the military, business, whatever it is, that understanding of we're not fixed, there will be mistakes and you can improve everything. Whereas on a more sort of emotional relationship level, I was definitely more fixed. It was very much well, this is who I am, take it or leave it. You know, this is it either works or it doesn't. And learning to recognize that, and then, you know, have uncomfortable conversations, actually talk things through, start to practice changing how I behave and communicate and the rest of it in the same way that I would towards work. Funny old thing, relationships improved. So the first part, or the first stage in that process of change, is just recognizing where you may have that fixed mindset, where you're either looking for perfection, or, you know, the often phrase is, well, that's just how I am, I'm just this way. Like if you're using a phrase around your health in terms of that, or wealth or relationships or any area of your life, that's a good indicator that actually that's probably not truth. That's just a belief that you have, and it's just a fixed mindset. But there'll definitely be room in there to start making changes.
there's lots of self-fulfilling prophecies when it comes to our self-talk. Like you say, oh, I'm bad with money, I'm never able to save, I've never been able to stick to a diet. The relationships piece, oh, I'll always be single, or oh, I always get mugged off or cheated on, or whatever term you want to use. I find it very interesting that we sometimes have, like you say, different elements of openness and willingness to change and grow in different environments. And there's probably lots of people that you encounter, like particularly professionals in their 40s, that have optimized for this growth-minded, excellent like career that they've built in, or a business that they've built, but they've neglected like their health or their body or their mind. And that's where you're like, well, do you know how successful you've been in this environment? I wonder if you could apply some of the mindset that you've had in this environment to this other element of your life and this other facet, and turn the dial in a positive direction in that way. And I've had this conversation quite recently, over a number of episodes with like different dating coaches and relationship coaches, because a lot of the people that listen to a self-development podcast were maybe optimized for health, fitness, money, business, and then we don't think about the relationships aspect. So I'm very grateful that you brought that aspect up as well, in terms of something that you've looked at on a personal basis too.
Yeah, it really, it's the self-fulfilling prophecy, because you essentially reinforce. So all of us will always act out of our identity, i.e. how we see ourselves and how we interpret the world, which is different for every single person. And the stories that you have about yourself, you use to navigate the world. You know, I'm liberal, I'm conservative, I'm an athlete, I'm academic, whatever it is, I'm clumsy, I'm late, I'm punctual, you know, all of these things, that the way that we see ourselves. And you will naturally you will bias towards things that reinforce that story. So when things happen that reinforce it, you will latch onto it, internalize it. And when they don't, you kind of just ignore it. So until you start bringing awareness to that internal piece, so how do I actually see myself? How do I view this? Why do I react this way? You know, something that I personally do, if I find myself getting triggered by something, whatever, reading something, you know, conversation, whatever it is, I know, just because I've trained this, my go-to is just to step back and ask myself, why is this frustrating you? Why is that pissing you off? Why is it annoying you? Because I guarantee it's never the surface level, you know, what that person said. It's something around the story that you have and your perception of it. And unless you understand what that is, you're never going to change. It's going to be very hard to change the results that you're getting, the way that you're behaving, basically everything in your life, until you're very aware of your stories. And that takes you confronting yourself and having an honest look at yourself and honest conversations. That's the one thing when we bring coaching clients on, when we have the initial call, the one thing that I really highlight is this process will only work when you're in a position to give yourself honest answers, to be honest with yourself. But to me, that's a positive and something that's freeing, because we all have parts of ourselves we don't like, or we don't really want to look at, or we want to change. But until we're willing to do that, we aren't going to change it and move forwards. So it's that, it comes back to that hard choices, easy life, easy choices, hard life. If we try and avoid discomfort, whether looking at ourselves or in any aspect of our life, you're going to pay a price for it. And it's just learning. And again, that in itself is a skill and something that we teach, how to go towards that discomfort, how to start embracing it, how to make that process actually something positive. And it's sometimes enjoyable as well. Make it more of a kind of playful learning experience as opposed to something negative and something negative.
Agreed entirely. And like you say, it definitely links back to that. Like you said, hard choices, they need to happen, and that's what we need to move forward. Moving average is one of the big lessons that you've clearly learned from your time in the Special Forces, but is there anything else that stands out that you've taken forward?
Yeah, moving average one. Funnily enough, the moving average, just sort of going back to that story, that was something. So John, who I run the Natural Edge with, it sort of came from, everyone knows about the 1% now, the 1% wins. It became very famous after Dave Brailsford talks about it with Team Sky. We actually heard it before that from Clive Woodward. So it was something that Clive Woodward applied to. So I think it originally came from a sailor, like back in the 80s. Clive Woodward heard about it and he applied it to the 2003 winning England World Cup team, Rugby World Cup team. And so we kind of latched onto it and started applying it in our military career. And we were just always looking at, okay, where are these percentage wins? How can we just nudge things forward as opposed to this one big thing? The other things, I think growth mindset is definitely something the military instills. And really, it's from a phrase, no cuff too tough. Everyone has, and I had it as well. When you look at the military from the outside, you imagine it's, especially special forces, that it's very slick and smooth running, and everything runs very, very smoothly. And it's just not the case. Things go wrong all the time, especially in the British military. Like, you're patching things together with black masking tape because you don't have the right kit or whatever it is. But the overall attitude is, well, we'll just make it work. Just cuff it, make it work, make it happen. And that happens all the time. And it's why, we are successful and jobs get done, because you just find a way to work around it. It's kind of like Ryan Holiday's the Stoic principle of the obstacle is the way. Like, you just find that path through it. So that's definitely another takeaway that I took.
Yeah, I love that. I've seen you write about move order matters. What does that mean?
Move order, you're gonna have to enlighten me on that, because I can't off the top of my head.
Yeah,
I was writing about there.
I read it in one of your posts, and it was basically about the order in which you do things, and how, if you, for example, lead with how would I describe it? Like, I think it was like you were talking about a business interaction. If you necessarily just go straight away with, right, we're going to achieve this goal immediately, like get straight to the sale, get straight to the close, then that puts you in a negative position. And you were speaking about how you have to be prepared to go through the steps to achieve the additional goal. And one of the things I wonder about military personnel when they come out is the level of patience that you maybe have. And it probably comes from having to patch together some of the different things that you do along your journey to achieve the thing, because things don't necessarily go from point A to point Z immediately, like perfectly. And I think it links to, as you said, no cuff too tough, which I'll definitely write down for future as well.
I think actually that is something, what you've talked about there is something that's definitely become more apparent, and a lesson I've really internalized through business. Because I'd say in nearly every aspect, apart from the physical one, business has been far harder than anything I did in the military. I take my hat to anyone who started any kind of business, because it is just hard. And the difference with it is, whereas in the military, let's say you take selection, it's very defined. It's 6 months and you go through it and you either make it or you don't. With business, it could take you 6 months, it could take you 6 years, it could take you 16 years to get to that place. There's just no certainty, like way more uncertainty than there is in the military in many ways. And it comes back to that process. There's so many mistakes that we've made in business to get to where we are. I'm sure we'll make more. But when we look back, and you can easily look back and be frustrated by that. But the way we always come back to, it's just process. The moving average and process is what I come back to all the time in life, whether it's relationships, whether it's business, anything, because it's all process. And that really grounds with, like, it's just part of the process, and you cannot bypass the process. You can learn lessons and improve and make sure that you're not repeating mistakes, but everything is a process. In anything you do, you have to have a bad first draft. Even when you're excellent at what you do, the first thing that you produce is generally not going to be the final iteration. You're going to do it, and then you're going to improve upon it and learn from it. And that is just life. So again, it comes back to, if you're not enjoying the process, you're missing out on life. The way that I sometimes phrase it is, people always look at the big milestones. So buying a house, graduating, getting a job, getting a promotion, getting married, making X amount of money, whatever it is. If you put all of those together on a timeline, they would probably make up less than 5% of your life. 95% of it is this. It's you and I having a chat. It's taking your dog for a walk. It's the day-to-day. And if 6 days out of 7, you're not generally satisfied, feel like you're on the right path, things going well, you feel happy, and yes, you're going to have those bad times, but I'm just talking generally now, you're missing out on life. And changes need to be made, because it's not, those milestones are great and they're good, but they last for a tiny amount of time, and then we're just back to the day-to-day. So I bring everything back to process, really structure my life around that, and make sure I'm looking for those small, just for me, when I get up and take the dog for a walk in the morning, no phone, just being present, just taking the dog, just taking in the park, just enjoying whatever the weather is, just kind of being finding that at peace with the world. Like,
Simple pleasures. They
so,
really matter, don't they? They really do, and it means that, like, if you can't enjoy going for a nice coffee and going for a walk or going out with the dog, you're probably not predispositioned to be able to enjoy the larger highs that maybe you chase at some point. And of course, you're just forever chasing the next one of those if you said your day-to-day is pretty miserable. And I know that you did go through a period where your day-to-day post-military was quite miserable, and you actually described working as a management consultant in London as more stressful than when you were in operations in Afghanistan. Why was that the case?
Because and it kind of links on to something else I was going to say with what you said there. You take the military, and people always look at it, and obviously what's publicised and what you see are the exciting things, jumping out of planes and all the rest of it. It's like 10% of what you do. So much of it, it's just fucking boring. Like, it's shit. So like, you're just hanging around for weeks and there's loads of stuff that is just not enjoyable. But overall, because it's something that you still, it comes back to this identity and purpose, because you're doing something that overall really ties into who you are. You still find, having a laugh with the guys around you, you find enjoyment in those times. But actually, a lot of the work people would hate doing, they just look at the sexy stuff, the exciting parts of it. And so kind of moving on to the question you've just asked there around why London, in many ways, working for a consultancy was more stressful than, say, operations in Afghan and Special Forces. Because in the military, doing that job, that was part of who I was. That was part of my identity. It really tied into, spoke to my values. And so I was doing something that was very in line with who I was. So even when you're doing hard testing things, it's almost easy to do them because it's very in line with what you want to do. You look at elite athletes, the training that they have to do to get to that level is very arduous, taxing, and boring. But because it ties so strongly into who they are and their purpose, it's almost easy for them to do that, whereas it would be very difficult to do that if that wasn't the case for you. So when I was in London, on the face of it, it was a well-paid job, living in the city, should have been much easier. But because it didn't tie into who I was, who I saw myself as, and really how I wanted my life to look, the best way I describe it was almost like this friction on a daily basis. And I saw the repercussions of that across every aspect. Health, my training, and my consistency dropped off. Diet was worse. Relationships, being more moody, more snappy, focus, procrastination, like all of these things you see as repercussions when that alignment between who you are and how you're interacting with the world is off key. There's something out of place there.
Yeah, huge. I think it's so important, and to break the wall with the listener. You and I were speaking before we hit record about you've got a busy weekend, you're preparing some slides for an upcoming presentation, and I was joking that sometimes working over the weekend on something that you care about, it doesn't feel like work in the same way that if somebody asked you from your corporate job days, "Oh, Simon, can you work a little bit later this Friday evening and pull together these slides?" It would have felt arduous. It would have felt a lot more sore than working on something that's within your value set and is almost not frictionless entirely, but a lot more friction free than if you were doing something that didn't feel like it was something you wanted or were meant to do.
Yeah, I am. It's kind of there's two parts to this. One is I'm a big believer in having that downtime and that energy, and I think in modern Western society we're really bad at allowing enough time to decompress, to relax, to balance the energy out with the energy in. However, and it comes back to the point of how hard it is starting and building a business, that is just going to be a necessary part of this journey until you get to a certain place. And it kind of comes back to, it's the same as selection. If you don't truly believe in what you're doing, it's so hard, you just won't do it. You just won't do it. You won't work those extra hours. You won't give up, make the sacrifices around it. But having said that, and it kind of ties back into, again, that journey I was just spoken about. Military, it was hard, but it was easy because it was in line with who I was. London was easy, but felt hard because it was out of alignment. After London, relationship ended, was stone broke because we spent all of our money trying our first business, which failed. And myself and John, who was basically been on this path with around business, both moved back into my parents', shared a £400 car, and we started the Natural Edge from my mum's dining room table. So like stone broke, mid-30s, all of your friends and peers around you are getting married and buying houses, and you're living like, something from the film Step Brothers. However, so on the face of it, it looked really hard and a massive kind of hit to the ego, but actually it was great because it was like, well, we know the path now. As soon as we came upon the concept from the natural edge, we're like, this is it. This feels right. Yeah, this is the path. This is what we're going to be doing for the next 50 years. This is what we're going to build over our lives.
The end was going to justify the means, wasn't it? Because you could see where it was going to take you. So you were willing to, I know you've said you don't necessarily like the term sacrifice, but you were willing to have that period of where, of course, maybe people were judging from the outside, oh, he's moved back to his parents, he's sharing a car with John, as you were saying, he's not really living a lifestyle that many people would want to live.
He's not successful.
Exactly. Well, successful in the eyes of the beholder,
Yeah.
exactly. But you were working towards a level of fulfillment and purpose, which it's clear you have now. Look at the way that you show up online continually with a message that you're happy to talk about. There'll be elements of that it never feels like work, because you're like, oh, well, I actually want to share this stuff. And like the way that you're able to just bring forth lessons to me constantly throughout this discussion, it's like, oh, wow, like this guy who lives and breathes what he's talking about now, whereas you probably would never have found that, even in that failed business that you had between your management consultant role and the natural edge. I wonder whether you would have been able to get the same level of purpose and fulfillment from that.
No, I'd say no. And that was a big mistake. So a classic mistake. And actually, I'll amend something you said there. It's not the end that justifies the means. It's the journey that justifies the means. It's the process. So we knew that, because we don't even know, even now, we're like, God knows what this will look like in 50 years. Who knows? Like, that's exciting. We're like, who knows what it'll look like? So we're going to be just putting in the work for another 40 years, whatever it is. So who knows where we'll get to. But we believe in what we're doing. And so we know that the process and the journey is always going to be satisfying and fulfilling. And the first business that we started, we chased making money. So when we first started, when we began and decided that we wanted to have a business in some form, we had no idea how that was going to look. And we definitely felt, you read all the books on entrepreneurship and starting a business, we're like, oh, yeah, how can we start something that's going to make us loads of money?
I know you read Tony Robbins' The 4-Hour Work Week, and that inspired you quite a lot. Tim Ferriss, sorry, that's it.
Yeah, we honestly, we read them all. And it was so funny. You read the books and you tell yourself, oh, I'm not going to, because they speak about all the classic mistakes that people make. Well, oh, we're not going to make those mistakes. We made every single mistake that we read about. And it's almost like it comes back to you almost can't bypass the process. Just by knowing something, it can still be easy to fall into those classic traps. But the difference between that first business and the natural edge, that first business was we were just chasing, oh, let's just make cash. We'll start something. We'll make loads of money and it'll be great. And obviously just completely failed. And then when we were at that kind of rock bottom, it was, well, let's just got nothing to lose. So let's do something we actually care about, which for us has always been health, performance, mindset. Even within the military, we were always looking for those, that edge, I guess, that those kind of 1%ers. CrossFit wasn't really a big thing when I first sort of came across it in 2008. But I could see how that functional fitness, and now you get tactical athlete, programs in the military all over the place. That wasn't a thing at all. And I remember the gym down at Poole, the SBS. There's probably 5 of us wearing Vibram 5 fingers and doing CrossFit type workouts. No one had heard of it. Everyone else classic bodybuilding still. Now that entire gym is like a CrossFit box. They got like strength and conditioning coaches, but it was stuff that we were doing like 10 years before that. Because we loved it. We had an interest in it, and that's just carried over to the natural edge.
One of the themes we've spoken about throughout the podcast is an element of comfort within the world. And you mentioned earlier that it's important that we seek relative discomfort. What are some of the ways that you achieve that in 2023?
Yeah, it's a really good question, because the modern world that we live in is geared to make us as comfortable as possible. Like we've made things as easy as possible for ourselves, but we're also paying a price for that, because we're not designed to live in perpetual discomfort. So you can do it in lots of different ways, everything from physical all the way through to emotional. So on the physical side, exercise is obviously an easy one, like doing, and I don't think it's something you have to do all the time. Obviously, another mantra I kind of have is make it as easy as possible to do the actions that you want. So if you want to improve your health and fitness, then find ways to make it enjoyable. That may be going to dance classes or boxing or whatever it is. However, now and again, there's benefit in doing something that's really uncomfortable and tests you. And that could be as simple as holding a plank is a great example. It's such a simple exercise that most people have done it, very quickly becomes very uncomfortable, and your brain is telling you to stop long before your body wants to give in. Cold water immersion has obviously got loads of coverage in the past few years. And again, it's a very simple tool. For me, even more so, I don't really do it for health benefits. It's the mental toughness, resilience building exercise, because it's not something that you ever want to do. I don't wake up and think, oh, I'd love to get in cold water now. You have an evolutionary mechanism that's telling you to avoid that for very good reasons, for survival reasons. That's not going to go away. And it feels uncut. That feeling of discomfort doesn't go away. So there's always that voice that says, don't do it. But the more you can understand that voice and overcome that voice and step towards discomfort and learn to embrace it and sit with it, the better you become at that skill across your life. I always use the example of, let's take athletes. It's not that they are that they don't feel any less discomfort or pain than you or I or anyone else. Yes, they're fitter, so the level at which that discomfort begins is higher than for us, but pain is pain, discomfort is discomfort. What they are better at is sitting with it, being able to process it, being able to go towards it and not shy away from it. And that is a completely trainable skill. So you can do that in physical exercise, you can do that with, say, cold water. But it's the same with conversations, not shying away from uncomfortable conversations with your partner, with your boss at work, with family members, with a friend, whatever it is.
Address the elephant in the room.
It's the same process across them all. Like, it's you being able to sit with and process and tolerate and go towards that discomfort. And it's a really valuable skill.
Your point on cold water immersion in particular speaks to me, because it's reinforcing maybe an identity that you've created about yourself. So I am a person that gets up and does a hard thing at the start of my day, and if I do it, it reinforces my discipline across all sorts of other areas throughout the rest of the day. Whether it gives you health benefits or dopamine or whatever other hormones are popping off in your head, that's fantastic. That's a downstream benefit. But if you know that I, Simon, do the things that I said I was going to do when I said I was going to do them, you can apply that to replying to the emails when you said you were going to reply to them, writing the presentation when you said you were going to write it, presenting it in a way that you said you were going to present it. And I think if you can start your day with discomfort, or at least challenge, and periodically do that throughout the day, it's going to have benefits across so many different elements of your lifestyle as well.
It's a really important piece. It comes back to that identity piece, because it's, as we talked about earlier, you will always default to how you see yourself. You will always default to those narratives. As much as we all love to think we're going through the day making very conscious, rational decisions, like, the research is clear, we don't. And the easiest way to see that is just ask yourself, how many times do you say you're going to do something or not do something, and then you do the opposite? If it was as easy as logically knowing what to do and making those decisions and following through with it, like, none of us would need any coaching. We'd all have six packs, be millionaires, living on a beach, because we just follow through exactly what we need to do. It just doesn't work like that. Psychology is far more complex, and it comes back down to those internal narratives. The escalators versus the stairs is a really good example of it. It does blow my mind every time you get in an airport or in London, and it's like people hit an escalator, or even in the airports, the kind of flat travelators that move along, and they hit them, they just stand still. It blows my mind. Anyway, part of that is, it's, say you choose the stairs or the escalator, it's not about the calories that you're going to burn, but it's about the choice that you're making in line with who you want to be. You are just saying to yourself, I am someone that always takes the stairs, always moves, and makes that conscious choice, because I see myself as someone who is strong, fit, and healthy. It's as simple as that. And every time you make a choice in line with that,
they compound massively.
Exactly.
I think that's where you were getting to, and I've got excited and interrupted you, but that's exactly
that's
exactly where you get to. And like you say, it doesn't. If you maybe take the stairs once in the shopping mall or in the tube on the way on the way out, that's fine. but it's doing it continuously and being the person that continuously makes those choices that reinforces a particular level of self-image. And I absolutely love that. Given what the military has clearly done for you, Simon, and built the man that we get to speak to today, would you advocate compulsory service for people in the UK post school?
I don't think so. I think there is. I don't know. There's definitely a huge benefit in it, but then play devil's advocate. If you just restructured the schooling system and how we teach people, essentially what we're teaching, even things down to around growth and fixed mindset, like how to manage money, actually important life skills and things that are going to make a huge difference. Does it necessarily need to be some kind of national fort service? No, I don't think so. I think you can take the lessons from it and embed it in many different ways. I don't think it necessarily has to be, because there's plenty of people that I know that are very successful, happy, great individuals, but they'd hate the military and it wouldn't do anything for them. So, and it's the beauty of the world and society that we're all different. So I don't even think it probably would be a good thing that trying to mold everyone into the same that same fashion. Like I've always had quite diverse friendship groups, like people in lots of different, interested in very different things, different views of the world, politics, like interesting from everything, geeky to Dungeons and Dragons. This guy that's just popped into my head now because I saw him post earlier about this online Dungeons and Dragons thing, through to physical stuff and competition and sport. And I love that. I love that variety and having different people that I interact with. It, I think, and it's something we've become guilty of now. People slip into echo chambers and they just look at information and surround themselves with people or whatever it is, or environments that just confirm their biases, and they get hard, they just take these very entrenched standpoints on everything really, whereas 99% of things in life is way more nuanced and grey than we give credit for, these black and white views, and people just get so entrenched in it, and it's causing a lot of problems.
I was really keen to hear your perspective as somebody that's served in the military, because one of my highest values is freedom and choice and personal responsibility, and choosing to apply ourselves in whatever domains we get into. And I guess, having not served in the military myself, but from a bird's eye view and interacting with people like yourself, Lindsay, or other guests that have been on the show, I do see the massive benefits for it, particularly for young men in a period where I think a lot of young men feel a little bit rudderless, a little bit lost. But I do agree that if the school system could fulfill some of those elements more so in some of these maybe developmental stages between 11 and 17, there wouldn't necessarily be the requirement for somebody to serve for a year post school in that environment. I guess I'm just thinking off the top of my head, like, what are the ways that we can maybe move things forward? And I guess, like you say, not everyone is perhaps minded to want to be within a military environment, but then some of the people that aren't minded to be in a military environment might benefit from some of the teachings of it, even if it was for a very, very short time. But I think the forced element is what gets people's back up and maybe makes people less willing to buy into the process too.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I think a lot of it comes down to that purpose. Imagine if you just cultivated people finding that purpose and exploring different paths. Like when you find people who love what they do, generally they are far more satisfied and happy. I worked with a guy when I went to New Zealand. I worked in a cocktail bar there, and Dylan, the guy that I worked with, we were only in our early 20s, but he had such a passion around making cocktails, and he was always like brewing up all these different I can't think of the word, like the stuff you put in cocktail, like not just the alcohol, but the aperitifs or whatever around it. And he was all experimenting with different flavors and combinations. And I had no interest in it at all, but being around him, it was interesting because just feeding off his passion. And you could apply the same to music or to sport or to the military or any of these things, or writing. It's like, generally, if someone finds something they can really engage with, it makes such a huge difference. And that doesn't necessarily have to be, what you do as a job. I think some people think, well, it's great, but how, I just don't have that ability. I've got responsibilities, the rest of it, suddenly change everything and go and try and be a writer. I need to bring money in. But it could be as simple as a hobby, starting a hobby that you do a few times a week, which could be, maybe it's writing a book, maybe it's going to a running club, a drama class, like just finding something that you enjoy. I know plenty of people that don't necessarily love their jobs, but it pays the bills, but it allows them then to facilitate things that they do around it. There's so many ways that we can fulfill these different aspects. It's just thinking a bit more. It's not shutting yourself down. Like if you want to pursue something, and perhaps what you pursue or want to pursue, the initial thing that pops into your head isn't realistic. However, there's usually lots of different ways to elicit similar experiences, but on an easier, that is manageable and is easier. And so it's just taking that time to just look and like, okay, I can't do it like this, but let's have a look at different ways. How could I go towards this and actually make it manageable?
That hobbies aspect is something I've seen you write about as well, Simon, because as you said, not everyone has to love what they spend their 40 hours a week doing for work. But if there's activities you do outside of work which are financially enabled by the work that you do, and those lift your mood in a particular way or shape your lifestyle in a particular way outside of that, then how you spend your time during work is slightly less important, as long as it's not like incredibly arduous and you hate it. You don't have to absolutely love it and be passionate about it if it's still maybe playing a role in your life and a building block and a foundation towards the other things that you really care about. And I like that you're advocating for people to have a wider range of interests and maybe than just career. Like that's very short term, isn't it?
And also, it doesn't matter. Like, no one's going to know. When you get to the end of your life, no one's going to give a shit that you're in special forces or that you did X, Y, and Z, or you had. No one cares. Like, I think this is the thing to really. You look at people who've been work with people at end of life palliative care, and all of the studies that come out of that, the books that are being written. It's people just care about the experiences they've had, the relationships they've had with the people around. Like, none of the rest of it matters. And even for us in our lives, I think this is beneficial. It can sound, try not to make it come across as kind of flippant, but it just doesn't matter. Like, we're here for like an instance. Right now, there's bones of ancestors under our feet. We don't know who they were. Like, there's a few names in history that will be remembered. Outside of that, once we're gone 10 years, maybe a few kind of your family may give you the odd thought, but really that's it. You're done. You're gone. It just doesn't matter. No one cares.
What kind of legacy do you want to leave?
I haven't even massively cooked because it doesn't matter. Like, it just doesn't matter. The way that I approach it is, while I'm here, live a good life. And what I mean by that is trying to find that fulfillment, purpose, satisfaction, but also help other people. Do that for the people around you, the relationships that people care about. Help them. Give back to the community. What we're doing with T&E, just the people we interact with, and helping them make changes. And like, if we all did that and kind of let go of this other stuff, just do the best we can for our immediate relationships and communities. If we all did that, it would have a massive effect. But kind of outside of that, like I said, it just doesn't matter. I think a lot of it gets tapped into ego and all the rest of it. But when you just kind of relax with it and just let go of it, things just become a lot simpler. I find anyway. So that's my personal take on it.
Yeah, I can certainly see that. Is that a mindset that you've always had, Simon, or has that changed in recent years?
Probably one I've just thought about more. I think, especially as we do this work and work with people, and you just kind of realize that, like I said, I think going in the military, and it was great that I did that, and I loved it and got a lot out of it, but it just doesn't matter. Even what we teach with mindset, I think you see a lot of people, just because someone has been in the military or say an elite athlete, and you hear some of the stuff that's put out, it's like, you don't know what you're talking about. It doesn't mean just because you've done a certain thing, and people misunderstand lessons and actually how things work. And yes, I'm not saying there aren't valuable lessons from it, but it doesn't automatically mean because
it's not immediately validated. Yeah, I agree. I agree.
And so, and it can be put on a pedestal. People put on a bit of a pedestal, like say elite athletes or military or business, or whatever it is. When the amount of people that I think just working with people now, that when you really hear about the lives and the stuff that they do, is people doing like incredible stuff that, not on the face of it, is maybe it's not as exciting as that, or appears exciting. It's kind of like, we talk about, I think there's a lot around, you've gone to war and serve your country. I don't know anyone in the British military. It's a little bit different. The Americans a bit different. British military, no one joined up because they were doing it for their country or any of this stuff. They joined it because they wanted to join the military. There was no, when we're going to Afghan, I don't know one person that was going out there because they wanted to make a difference. Because let's be honest, like the whole reason we're there is, it's like it's a whole different topic. But no one's doing it, for that. And then we kind of overlook like the job that nurses do on a daily basis, or people who work in the NHS. It's such a hard, taxing environment, like day in, day out. But it's not as perhaps like sexy, or there's not the jumping out of the plane side or all the rest of it. I'm maybe not articulating it as well, but what the point being, it just doesn't really matter, all of this stuff. It's just about trying to be that good person, like thinking about other people, trying to do the best that we can for ourselves and those around us, and kind of letting go of these arbitrary measures of success or the societal expectations. I think just humanizing it, just humanizing things more.
Absolutely. I think one of the reasons that somebody would listen to somebody like yourself about mindset is that you have that background, of course, which validates it to some extent in terms of the package that a message comes in does matter. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah.
But equally, you are bringing that thoughtful element there, like you've just explained, where it's a lot easier to listen to somebody who has that level of awareness about both theirself, their own role, and society's general standings. And you're able to then talk about, well, actually, it's not massively important that I served in the forces, but what I am telling you about mindset comes from a place, yes, I've learned some of these things in the forces, but I've also worked on them massively in other aspects of my life to allow me to communicate them to you, who potentially the vast majority of your clients will never have been in the military. And it doesn't matter that you're in the military, but what it does matter is you're able to help them with an element of their life that they need support with.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And it's, it does matter, and it's massively helped. I think it's actually an interesting point. I'd say, like I said, I love the military and I had a great career, but I definitely feel like we've done far more and helped far more people with T&E and the people we work with than anything I ever did in the military. But being in the military helps facilitate this because, like you said, it gives the credibility and the reach, even if necessarily a lot of the stuff I'm teaching is basically everything I learned after it and just retrospectively use stories to illustrate it. I think the wider point I was sort of trying to make, and maybe a better way to see it, is that it's something that happened recently in the last couple of days. On the whole, it doesn't really matter. So my partner is just, she is or was a nurse and is now she does like work for a humanitarian organisation, UK Med, and she's just gone out to Turkey a couple of days ago, and she just texted yesterday, and they've just, she's just speaking to someone. They just pulled an infant basically out of the rubble, like a baby, and all of her brothers and her parents were all killed. So this infant basically they're going to have no memory of her family. Like, she was just lucky enough to survive. And it's stuff like that happening all the time around the world. And just when you step back, you're like, that's what I mean by it just doesn't matter. Doing what we can each day. And I'm not saying don't strive for success and do these things, but just bringing that perspective back to it. Like, it doesn't matter in reality what level anyone gets in the military. They're all valid jobs. It doesn't matter, with business, whether you become a billionaire or you just make enough to have that nice lifestyle or just new work, whatever it is. It's just, I think, grounding yourself again in that, the human, we're all humans, we're all on this planet for a short period of time, just trying to get along and do our thing. And really all of us are looking for is that happiness and satisfaction. And that generally does come from the relationships we have and experiences we're having. And if we're not being aware of that and missing that, then we're missing out really on life and what life's about.
It's a very, very powerful perspective, and it definitely links into what you were talking about in terms of those simple pleasures. When you go for a walk with your dog in the morning, regardless of the conditions, you battle through the cold water to set yourself up for the day. You enjoy the training session that you have, and you come back and you spend time, like you say, you get to talk to your partner who's pursuing a really noble mission at this moment in time. But Simon, thank you very much for your time. I've absolutely loved the conversation. I'm sure the listeners have as well. Where should they head towards to continue the conversation with you?
So you can find any of our stuff on, it's The Natural Edge on Instagram. We've just started a YouTube as well. It's Simon Jeffries on LinkedIn, and then our website's thenaturalEdge.com.
Perfect. That'll be linked in the show notes. Thank you very much to you, the listener, and I'll be back to speak to you all again very, very soon.